We are live. Welcome back to The Changed Physician. I am Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we're here to bring you Sunday Salutations. I did it solo last weekend, and we're back again. And for sharing not just what happened in the podcast and what's upcoming, but also any recent events or thoughts or tangents we like to go on. How are you doing there, Kevin?
I am okay.
Okay.
I am okay. It has been a rough couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But okay. Okay.
You're back in it.
I am back in it. There's sometimes when you are reminded of things like the preciousness of life and friendship and things like that. So,
yeah.
And reprioritizing things. So that was one of the reasons I was not here last week, is we had some things occur and spend some time to do fun things with family and enjoy the beautiful state I live in.
Yeah. Love Oregon. And remind you of, no matter what it is, I always like the idea of the ripple effect and how you affect things around you more than you realize sometimes, and it may not be so obvious. Sometimes it's subtle. But I think in our podcast, we like to have a ripple effect too, and make a difference for those that are struggling or trying to, make their career better. Maybe just work on personal development and start taking care of themselves again better. We've had guests that range from primary care physicians that go into coaching to people restructuring how they do medicine to, Eric Tate, who works 1 day a week as an internal medicine physician, but yet does all this amazing real estate investing and whatnot, and extremely educational on a lot of different topics, to Dr. Kayla Redden, who was, Doc Thor, #Doc Thor, who is trying to inspire people to take better care of themselves. And, so we've had such a range of people, and there's so many aspects to our lives that are incredibly important. And there are times where we kind of ignore certain aspects of our lives. And sometimes we need things around us to remind us to shift back into taking care of certain parts of our lives, or tending to our family and friends more, and appreciating things that maybe we, have not given much attention to or take for granted. Right now there's over 30,000 people that have died, at least 33,000 in Turkey and Syria from earthquakes that hit them. And regardless of the infrastructure maybe not being as ideal, just hearing this and seeing the images and seeing the fragility of life there, it's hard to complain when you just open your eyes.
Well, it's really easy to complain.
It is easy, but
and then you get reminded that really there's not a lot. Why are we complaining about these things? But
first world problems.
I think that's the kicker. And we always talk about this theme of awareness on the podcast, and it comes up again and again. Is the more aware you are of things, the better able you are to, I hate the word manage, but manage them, master them, plan for them, be proactive about what to do about them, and certainly what to do after the event. So I don't like being reactive, but again, how do you frame things in certain ways? But the other part of awareness is we become so self-absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
We live in this little virtual reality, which my reality is not your reality, and we tend to think it's the only reality, and we sort of forget those ripples that you do. And the words that you use and impact other people. And you may not think that that you're having the impact, or maybe your life doesn't have meaning. But unless you're getting third-party perspectives on that, it's always important to understand is you don't actually know the lives you're impacting until other people tell you. Mm-hmm. And to make that judgment then that, for some whatever reason that that I don't know. It's so easy to go in that dark place and think that your life doesn't matter, but you do. So
yeah. I think there are just, if we really become aware, like you are exemplifying right now, it will hit you in ways that sometimes you don't expect, or you realize are necessary for us to really appreciate the things around us. And I think it brings up so many emotions depending on what it is. And I think it's easy for us sometimes to stuff it down and avoid, and because the pain of that can be so harsh. And I hope that, by being genuine on this podcast and on our, Facebook lives here, is that we make people think. I think that's what you and I have in common, is that we're thinkers by nature. We think differently, which is great. And we have an appreciation and respect for that. And I think we genuinely want to come across as offering hope, and that other people will find options in their lives, or just recognize the things that they have or don't have, and what they want to work on, and hopefully it gives them some insight with the guests we bring on, or just us talking to get together. We just want people to think about things more, because as a quote that I came across recently, a very simple quote, understand that your emotions drive all of your actions. Our beliefs, our emotions, they're a big reason. And sometimes we need moments to remind us, holy crap, like, I've been driving my life in this direction, and is that what I really want? Were you going to say something?
And most importantly, is that just because you're going in one direction doesn't mean you have to stay in that one direction.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's that's where that awareness piece comes in. And it also reminds me of, and I think this is from, I should look it up, but that phrase of "this too shall pass."
Yeah.
And we typically will use that as, we'll typically use that during hard periods, like when things are really, really challenging, is to recognizing that things are really hard and difficult, but at some point that'll pass. But the other part that I also think is really important to understand is that also happens to the really good things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a frame there, because if you recognizing that we're really sort of riding these waves, and the whole, emotion is not static. Everything is moving here. So there's going to be high points and there's going to be low points. And recognizing that when you're in a low point, that the next swell is coming, even if it seems really, really dark and really, really deep, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
But also on the high point too, because if you think that your life is supposed to be perfect all the time, you're going to be sort of set up for failure when it changes. And it's that appreciation then between the highs and the lows that really kind of define what your life is. There's another quote from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. Let me see if I can find it. That basically says is, oh God, now I can't find it. I should have had, on joy and sorrow. And so in The Prophet, which is a great small little book by Khalil Gibran, then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises would oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? and is not the lute that soothes your spirit, the very wood that was hollowed by knives. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. And yeah, I'm sort of babbling about that, but it's when you have really hard times, this is to recognize that one of the reasons that things are so hard is because of those highs that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And it mattered.
Mm-hmm. You know, we both come from a world of pain, ironically, you and I, as far as our training. Everything you just said right there is reflective of, do we feel safe? And for some reason, the perception of the human body, the nervous system, the spirit, however you want to describe it, those sudden falls, those sudden changes seem overwhelming and threatening to your existence. And I can't help, like, I'm forever changed because of understanding pain differently. And it's hard for me to like get it out of my head, Kevin. Like literally everything you just read there is this sense of like, I'm in danger. I'm threatened. I've gone from here to here. And if it wasn't so drastic of a change, it may not have affected me the same way versus like small changes over time. I'm curious your thoughts because I think we see things differently.
Well, I agree with you with the pain thing. And I wouldn't say seeing pain differently. I would say seeing pain scientifically.
Yeah.
That's the biggest
different
thing.
than a lot of people see it. How about that?
Well, because they're not seeing it scientifically. I mean, that's the big problem there. But I do think it's the heights in what are, I'm going to start getting geeky again.
Yeah.
Our brains are designed to perceive differences. It's like differentiation allows you to actually define what things are. And what I like about that quote is to recognize that this too shall pass part is the fact of the matter is those deepest pains that carve those furrows into your soul also then when they pass are the things that can be filled with joy. Mm-hmm. Because if you've never experienced hardship or difficulty or trials or tribulations, then it really becomes hard to appreciate the good things. Mm-hmm. That concept of post-traumatic growth, nobody chooses to go through trauma, but when you do and you emerge on the other side, there's an opportunity to be so much more appreciative and better than you were before. It's just rough to see it when you're kind of going through it. So, but the brain is really, really good at setting up this differentiation. Yeah. The brain doesn't like static things. On the flip side of it, when we're talking about, well, can I just stay quote unquote happy all the time, which is like it's a foolhardy pursuit. You simply cannot be happy all the time. Your brain's going to adapt. And I spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks kind of thinking about this a little bit more is, this idea of we achieve something and at some point it just doesn't seem to be worth it anymore. And there's the danger of that emptiness is I have all this stuff yet my life still feels empty. Well, part of that is how the brain works. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if the brain's natural state is satisfaction, we're not going to do the things that we need to do to propagate the species. Instead, in many ways, the brain's natural state is dissatisfaction, with moments of time of like these punctuating periods of joy, of feeling, grandiose, that then quickly returns again to this kind of low ground state of dissatisfaction. And that's perfectly normal, because it's that dissatisfaction, I think as Tony Robbins, I think, says, dissatisfaction ends in action. That kind of primal state then drives you to motivated behavior versus the opposite. So there's a reason then that our brains perceive differences. There's a reason then we typically, if everything's going perfect in our life, that we don't appreciate the perfection of our lives. And I'm certainly trying to remind myself of that when the imperfections of life rear their ugly heads, is to again recognize it as these moments in time that provide a transition. We don't ask for them, we don't want them, we certainly don't wish for them, but when they occur, there's an opportunity there to improve. And yeah, but it is weird how our brains really kind of, the baseline is a dissatisfaction, kind of this low-grown malaise versus the other one. And like I said, you can kind of imagine that if everybody was perfectly happy all the time, what would get done?
Yeah. Thinking about like many Americans have all these things at their fingertips, Amazon, things drop at their door almost every day if they want. Like there's so much like at your fingertips with access, and you have someone in a third world country who gets their hand on a soccer ball and they have like barely anything, their family barely has anything to their name and barely has a roof that probably in a big storm could crash to the ground. Like there's these simple pleasures that can bring joy and happiness, and it's, you just think about like, then there's these people who have everything and they seem so depressed, or so dependent on their likes on Instagram, or all these things that we have a lot of mental illness despite having all this stuff, or
perhaps more, right? Because when you remove all trials and tribulations, or there isn't much, there's things that are really easy, or there's no meaning, or I shouldn't say no meaning, when there's a perception of lack of meaning, or when there's a perception of what you do doesn't matter anymore, it is so easy to get in a dark space there.
Yeah.
And so we have this world where we think that if we make everything easy, everything's going to get better, and that's not really the case.
No. How do you build resilience?
How do you build resilience? This comes even when we look at kind of the parenting stuff. If you are paving over every trial and tribulation that your child experiences when they're young, they don't have that skills and muscle set to deal with the things, the trials that occur when they're older. And if you've, God forbid, you've been doing your kid's homework in high school, which apparently happens, and then your kid goes off to college, how are they supposed to, and then you think that they're going to thrive? They haven't built any strength there.
Yeah. I always feel like there's this, not being a parent, but there's this weird thing. If you feel like your child is just an extension of yourself and people are going to judge you based on them and not see them as an individual, like I think there's a balance of, looking out for your child, make sure they don't get killed or have something catastrophic where they can't jump back from. If you at least allow them to struggle a little bit, like that's incredibly important on making them prepared for the world. And even if they might fail, but that's a lesson, and failure, this whole idea of failure as a bad thing, to a certain degree, it's just lessons on your journey. Like there's part of that journey is that resilience building. I don't know. I just, I don't want to say too much because I'm not a parent, but I also see a lot of parents and kids around me with different outcomes. You made me think of this quote. I actually put it in my recent little Pain and Simple book. The secret of success is learning how to use pain and pleasure instead of having pain and pleasure use you. If you do that, you're in control of your life. If you don't, life controls you. And that was Tony Robbins. I thought that was, I don't know, just made you really think about understanding, being aware, like you were talking about, that there are going to be these ups and downs, and you can, manipulate that versus being like the victim of it. So any thoughts?
Oh, I always have thoughts.
Okay, well, maybe we should explain what's happening in the podcast.
The podcast, yeah.
Feel free though if you want to say something.
No, I was gonna. That comes down to being proactive versus reactive in so many different ways, and it's like you're gonna move in some way, shape, or form. But if if you're just reactive and waiting for life to do the things, and it's like cattle prods, right? They're just going to cattle prod you and you're going to drive you wherever that goes, or cattle prod to the trough versus, understanding that if you have a specific place that you want to go, it may take some pain to go over that mountain, but the long-term gain is much more worth it. But it all comes down to that level of awareness.
Yeah,
for sure. Awareness is key. But when am I supposed to talk about the podcast?
I am looking up our
guests or whatever we did.
Today's date. Last Sunday was we released, so because I forgot to release a Thursday throwback, the prior week I went ahead and pushed it into Sunday's episode. And so that was Dr. Aaron Wiseman, who's primary care, went into coaching. We did a special episode called the One Word episode that released on Sunday. And then we did an actual Thursday throwback with Dr. Marcy Larson, who basically how to help the grieving. And her husband, who's also a physician, lost one of their children, and has extended her contribution to the world and helping people who are grieving their own losses. Incredibly powerful episode. So we brought that back. And then today is the 12th. So we're going to be releasing, you want me to say what's coming out today?
Yeah. What's coming out today?
So Dr. Corey Fawcett, we talked about he has several books. General surgeon by training, retired, and in this other phase of his career, and giving back in a lot of ways, and a lot of books out there. And this one in particular is like starting your medical practice or career right. I think the book actually says starting your practice right. And I think they put a cross through it and say career, because people thought it meant like private practice, but it's more of like setting up your career. So I went through talking about that book. We'll have a Thursday throwback obviously this week, but make sure to stay tuned for that. Any comments off that, Kevin?
Nope. Always great episodes. And
yes.
I like that one weird one. I totally forgot about that. And then I also forgot about the grief ones. That's a good one to kind of review every here and now.
Yep. So I think that's about it. I know these last couple of weeks have been ups and downs for you, and of course we had our huge ice storm that I shared with our audience last weekend. Put a lot of people out of power, and speaking of first world, a lot of people in Austin were out without power for like a week, believe it or not.
I believe it.
3,000 phone calls versus 300 at the snowpocalypse in 2021, if it gives you an idea of the disaster of you literally drive through streets. They're having 35 crews help out, different businesses, I guess, help out with picking up all this brush. You'll drive through, you can't even see the house because the number of trees in some of these streets that are piled up on the curbs. You got these like barricades of trees on both sides of you. So it's pretty crazy. But anyway, why don't you take us out today, Kevin?
Sure. Well, thank you for Sunday Salutations with the Change Physician podcast. This is Dr. Kevin Cuccaro with Dr. Melissa Cady. As always, you can join us on most weekends. We're usually here unless we're doing something else. And if you're interested, you can join the community at thechangephysician.com. And until next time, stay well.
Take care.